Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Physical Performance Manager at the Parramatta Eels in the NRL, Paul Devlin. This episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is sponsored by Valve Performance, the team behind the NordBord hamstring testing system. So the NordBord is the fastest and easiest, most accurate way to measure hamstring strength in under 90 seconds. So the NordBord gives you the right information so you can make the right decisions for your players at the right time. So it's already in use by over half the Premier League and dozens of other elite teams around the world. So the NordBord testing system is on its way to becoming the gold standard for measuring and monitoring hamstring strength. So if you are interested in getting to know anything more about the NordBord, you can visit Vald Performance, that's VALD performance.com, to find out more. This episode of the Pacey Performance Podcast is sponsored by Train with Push, creators of the Push Band. So the Push Band is the first scientifically validated wearable device to provide objective insights into your performance in the gym. So using accelerometers and a gyroscope, the Push Band is able to use bar speed to regulate load and volume based on your ability in the gym on any given day. So you can use the Push Band to quickly establish 1 RMs with submaximal load so you can plan with confidence. So the Push Band portal also allows you to create programs before entering the gym to make change on the fly depending on how you are performing on that given day. So you can customize everything from target velocity ranges to differentiating velocities for warm-up and creating working sets and supersets for yourself or your athletes. So if you do want to know more about Train with Push and the Push Band, get yourself over to trainwithpush.com. They also got a great blog, so you can catch up with some guest bloggers such as Mladen Ivanovic and Dan Baker. So be sure to check them out at trainwithpush.com. Thanks for tuning in to episode 80 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. So we're going to keep this intro nice and short, but we've got ex-professional rugby player and current physical performance manager at the Parramatta Eels, Paul Devlin. So Paul's an English guy working in the NRL, one of only a few I'm led to believe. And we chat all things pre-season, given the nature of the NRL at the minute, obviously just coming off the back of the pre-season into the season itself. We also discuss a really interesting topic that I've kind of touched on in another couple of episodes which are coming up, and that's keeping players interested, which I think is a really interesting topic and one that Paul gives a really interesting insight into. So I hope you enjoy episode 80 with Paul. Again, appreciate any feedback, and Paul would appreciate that as well. So enjoy episode 80 and I'll speak to you soon. Okay, thanks for tuning in to the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today we've got Paul Devlin. So welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Thanks very much, mate. I appreciate you having me on.
It's good to hear an English voice in the Australian NRL. So do you want to give us a little bit of information on your background and your current role and what you're doing?
Yeah, so my current role, I'm at Parramatta Eels. I'm the physical performance manager here. So essentially that encapsulates looking after the physio department, the strength and conditioning side and the sports science. Pretty much means I get blamed for anything other than what the boys do technically on game day as well. I've been doing that for this my second year here. The year before that I was at Melbourne Storm. And that was just an absolutely fantastic experience. It's a brilliantly run organisation. Before that I did 2 years at Hull FC in Super League in the UK. And then before that I was at Doncaster Knights. Previous to that it was a nomadic tour of Europe in playing professional rugby league and rugby union since the age of 18. So lots of different experiences throughout my playing career that have definitely helped mould the way I approach high performance and athletic development. And I really wouldn't have had it any other way. I've been very lucky in my playing career and very lucky in my coaching career as well so far.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that came up on Twitter a couple of days ago was trying to get some athletes on to try to get their perspective on their kind of experiences of strength and conditioning, sports science, and the kind of whole support team. But what was your experience of strength and conditioning, your playing days? Positive? Was it something you took? Comment.
Yeah, look, I had a real mixed bag.
Okay.
I think, and I'm only grading that based on my experiences now, and I suppose my beliefs, having educated myself on it, both academically and empirically as well. I think what is good and bad, I suppose, it's making the most of your abilities and potential athletically. That's how we should be judging whether people are good or not so good at their jobs. But I think starting out early, it was for me. I started at Sale Sharks. I had 3 years there, and I had a very good strength and conditioning coach early called Marty Hume. He's actually working over in Japan now. He's an Australian, and he was fantastic for me. And he probably sparked the desire to work in physical performance at some point in my career, because he was just so well planned and thought out that it really drove me for the rest of my career to be at least a diligent professional, because he instilled that in me from a very early age. But from a setup point of view, there was no academies back then, so it was really when I signed my contract at 18, I signed a 3-year contract, and I was thrown in with the top squad to play professional rugby union. I was nowhere near big enough, nowhere near strong enough, nowhere near mature enough, and I had a pretty harsh first year really, and they taught me a few lessons that have been fantastic for me. And keep your gob shut, know your place. It's a bit different to the way it is today, but again, I wouldn't have had it any other way. I think certainly along my career, then I had a few years in Ireland with a really good strength and conditioning coach, Widnes, who was very good for me. And then I went over to France, and it was very different in France. And I suppose looking back, I found that really, really difficult, because again, at this point in my career, I was focusing everything on physical performance. I was very, very interested in it, even though my goal was obviously to be playing lots of professional rugby. But the approach in France was completely different to anything I've ever seen. And it was all about kind of enjoyment, and they didn't particularly like training all that hard, although if you flick the switch, sometimes they did. And it was a very relaxed atmosphere off the field. And I found that really hard to handle, having come from Munster, where we'd been European champions the year before, and there was a team full of internationals there who were just incredibly tough trainers. It was a very professional setup at the time, and so I suppose the different exposures there. And then I dropped down to second tier rugby then in southwest, I think it is, of the UK, Cornish Pirates, and had 3 great years down there learning about strength and conditioning. But dropping down a level, I found that I just got all this different exposure to totally different approaches, and different approaches to treating injuries, rehabbing injuries, strength, conditioning, gyms with no facilities, like in France, where I think we had 8 dumbbells, and they were all different weights, so we didn't actually have a pair of any. And this is a top 14. This was a top 14 French rugby club competing against Brits, Toulouse, and we finished 9th. And I thought, how have we done this? How have we physically competed week in, week out, when 50% of the squad never lift a weight? They've got no interest in weight training. But it was just a different approach, and I still don't agree with it today. But it works, and I can't hide from the fact that it worked for those blokes. And I suppose what I'm getting to is the whole wide range of experiences that I managed to get there probably gave me an outlook whereby I remember John Goodwin saying to me at St. Mary's College that getting a master's degree and making sure that you understand the theory behind things just gives you a good bullshit detector. Yeah. And it just gives you the ability to be able to know when something stacks up and when it doesn't. And then one of my mentors, I suppose my main mentor, Kelvin Giles, he's been phenomenally good for me. He's just the hugest influence on me. But one thing he always says is you need to be able to justify why you're doing what you're doing. And I think looking back on my playing career, that's what I learned from it, is that you need to be able to justify why you're doing it, or at least have some sort of theoretical rationale for why you're doing things. But certainly I had a mixed bag of experiences, but I wouldn't have had it any other way, because I think you've got to get all those different experiences to shape your coaching philosophy.
So one thing that you kind of touched on there a little bit that kind of takes me into the next little point that I wanted to raise was about keeping your boys interested, and this probably goes to obviously your current role and your previous roles. I've been to a professional football club as we discussed earlier, and there was kind of all the pros walking in who didn't look particularly interested in coming to training. And I just thought, I hope there's someone out on that pitch who's putting the cones out, who's thinking, I need to keep these boys interested because they're on so much money. They've won so many different trophies all over the world. I hope they're actually thinking about their kind of psychological state. What do you do to try to keep your boys interested throughout a long season?
Yeah, it's something that's not discussed and is just absolutely crucial. All coaches talk about this between themselves. I think one thing I have noticed, certainly being over in the NRL now in Australia, it's an incredibly competitive environment. That's the first thing. And I think when you've got really competitive clubs and training environments that are very competitive, that tends to mean that the whole keeping them interested in doing something a little bit different is less important or less frequent. And certainly here at the Eels at the moment, we're really lucky that we've got very, very good squad depth. So our reserve grade are top of the ladder at the moment. They're going great. Our under-20s, they're top of the ladder as well, and they're going great. And the NRL team, I suppose, well, fifth at the moment, but joint top on points. So when you've got that competitive environment, it really drives your training. And I think that's where you get the need for keeping players interested. Well, the number one most interesting thing is when they're trying to get their position in the team. That's the best way. And the best way, I suppose, fundamentally is making sure that the players underneath those top guys are fighting for the jersey as well. And then I suppose that's based on the standards and the culture of the club. And you can't change that very quickly, and culture's banded about all over the place, I know that. But I think culture for us is just about behaviours that are accepted and behaviours that are enforced, really. And so we have a big thing on that. We have a big thing on accountability, and by accountability, we try to give the players the information they need so they know what they need to work on. And again, that keeps them interested because at this level, at the real elite level, players want to be the best. There's always something to strive for. If you're a first grader who's playing regularly, then Origin. If you're an Australian, there's Origin. If you're not, there's international football as well that you can strive for. So I think making sure that they've got the information to know what they need to work on to be a better footballer on the field, because really that's all they generally care about. Injury prevention and playing better when they get to the weekend. So we need to arm them with the information on how what we do physically will enable them to perform better when they play. So it's accountability there and making sure that we hold them to those things that we want them to work on and improve. And then I suppose some things on the gym that we use that most coaches around the place probably use. Sounds stupid, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but music's a really big one in our gym. So we can change the mood of some of our players just by playing music that they like. And not necessarily, well, it's almost never my choice, but some of the things we have to listen to as coaches drives you crazy, but it can genuinely change the mood of a player. And I'm talking day 4, maybe a Thursday in pre-season week, and the players are absolutely exhausted. They've just come off a 7, 8, 9K field session where they've had the balls run off them. They're absolutely exhausted. They've had a break for lunch and probably made themselves feel even more tired by sitting around. Then they come into the gym and we start our mobility stuff and we try and get them moving so that we can have a good, strong gym session. And we've just found that energy and passion from your coaches, they've got to really, really care about what they do, and sensible music choices can change the mood in the gym. And it's a really simple thing. And aside from that, then we use gym aware. We've got push bands, and we've got a force plate as well, which we use fairly frequently, as well as a good old stopwatch. And what we do by that is we just drive a competitive environment in the gym as much as we possibly can. And that can be millions of things. As you know, with the gym aware, it can be anything. I mean, we've even just invested in a Nord board in the last couple of months. And although we wouldn't use that all too often, when we do use it, it's so competitive. They just want to win all the time at everything they do. The gym aware is fantastic for that, and the push band's the same. But the mid-thigh pull on our force plate has been really handy for us because it allows us to look at a maximal strength score, a max force, without too much fatigue afterwards. Whereas with a max squat, it's a little bit more difficult. But some of the display options on these sorts of testing devices now, especially gym aware and the push band, they're really, really good when you get your iPad in there or get the leaderboard, the latest gym aware software we've had up on our TV screens in the gym. last week actually, when we were on a fairly short turnaround, and we wanted to make sure that we got some real good speed power movements in the gym, and it just makes the gym so competitive. So we'll flick those sorts of things into the gym when we're trying to keep them interested in them. I suppose on the field side of it, again, this may sound super simple, but we're pretty simple here, is when we're doing our warm-ups, they need to be energy-based. You can't just do the same thing every day, but generally they need the same movements every day when we're on field. But we'll do simple things, and I'm sure all coaches do this as well, where we'll get the boys to jog around the field with us and we'll scream out a number, and they've got to get into that group. The last players left over, they have to do 5 push-ups. Doesn't really matter. Or we'll get them to get into shapes, or we'll just do something a little bit fun, just to snap them into the right mindset. And then once you snap them into that mindset, these are competitive, hungry footballers who want to get picked in the team, and they know that the coaches are always watching. So sometimes I just think it's getting different things. It could be a joke. It could be something from us as coaches to try and snap them into that energetic mindset. So yeah, we try to do that, and sometimes we'll change schedules as well. So if we have day names, so we have a relentless effort day, which is our 3 days out from a game, and the aim of that day is we want you to go from A to B as fast as you can, do everything at max effort, and effort's never compromised on that day. So you're 3 days out from a game. We're not overly worried about fatigue. We want to make sure you do everything as hard as you can. And then 2 days out from a game, or the day before a game, sorry, is our total preparation day. So that's the day when you finally hone all your skills. But before those 3 days, we don't mind chopping and changing the schedule a little bit. Again, to keep them interested, we might put something completely different in. We might go and do a pool-based session. Again, it's always based around trying to get them smiling and enjoying themselves and having fun. And similarly, on field sessions, we might bring out our sound system and have some music during the warm-up. It was something that I took from the Seattle Seahawks and Washington Huskies in America. They have music on in every single warm-up. And the players kind of do a bit of a dance routine, actually, in their warm-up. It looks like a dance routine. It's a stretch routine that's synchronized, I think. But we took that away and thought, you know what? Why can't we have music in the warm-up? If it means that they've got more energy to deliver into the session, then that's exactly what we're trying to get from it. And some people look at it and think, well, music's distracting, the boys aren't serious. But I think they've got to be able to learn to flick that switch as well and know when it's time to work. And warm-ups can generally be fun. So I've waffled on a bit there, but that's generally the gist of what we do to try and keep them interested.
No, that's really good, mate. Thanks for that. Just another thing, obviously, with you guys being kind of early stages of your season, do you just want to talk to us a little bit about how your pre-season went? And firstly, you kind of build up to the pre-season with regards to your planning and how that kind of plan was fulfilled or not fulfilled during the pre-season.
Yeah, well, we had a tricky off-season this year. So off-season, by that I mean the period before the players return. The RLPA, which is the Players Association over here, changed the rules 2 weeks after the grand final. Or a week after the grand final, to say that all the players had to have a minimum 8 weeks off. I think they negotiated it down to 7, but it'll flick to 8 next week. I'm pretty sure it's 8 weeks in the AFL as well. And then they brought in new rules again, which were all new to us. You can only train for 6 weeks before Christmas. You must have 2 weeks off at Christmas. And then obviously it's 4 weeks before we go into the Auckland Nines and our trial games. But that threw a bit of a curveball at us. But as if that wasn't enough, at the Eels this off-season, we moved into our new facility, or say new, it's a temporary facility where our high-performance centre will be built in 2 years, or 2 to 3 years. So we had a completely new gym building to put in, and then we had to equip the gym building as well. And anybody out there who's ever done that before knows that it never goes to plan. So, I mean, we were right up until 3 days before the players came back. We were still putting equipment in. We had a shipment from Techno Gym, who were brilliant, but from in Italy, where the equipment was manufactured, was delayed in customs in Singapore, and all those little things that you never really hear about were seem to happen to us in this off season. So aside from the actual physical load planning, we had an absolute multitude of mini disasters in our off season, but we got there, and the players turned up to an equipped gym on day one of pre-season, and that was good. So yeah, we do 6 weeks pre-Christmas. As I say, that's all we're allowed to do. we make sure that the players have got targets. Certainly any players from our current club who haven't come into us, any current players, they'll get targets, and they'll get targets for their skin folds and their DEXA scan, and they'll get targets for their body weight, and they'll get an aerobic fitness target as well. And that'll be based on a 1.2k time trial, but also on a 30-15 intermittent test. And that's because they've got previous experience doing that. And the boys have been with me now for 2 years. They know what they need. Exactly what sort of sessions and training they need to do to make sure they can hit those targets. They're fairly familiar with them. For our senior players, then, if they turn up and they screen well, we'll give them an extra 2 weeks, or 1 to 2 weeks, where they kind of get a big choice on what they do. Can you still hear me okay there, Ron?
Yeah, it's good, mate. Yeah, it's all good.
Checking. So from there, then, our young lads certainly will start straight away and do the full 6 weeks. If not, I've done an extra 2 weeks where we make it kind of optional for them for some of the guys who really need to put some size on. And then really the first week for us is we get our DEXAs done, we get our skin folds done, we do our aerobic and anaerobic testing, and we'll look at building. We've got a good strength coach here, Jared Wade, who we brought in this year, and we've built a really detailed strength and power profile, which allows us to individualize our gym programs, both in pre-season, in the latter stages, and in season. So we'll start to build that and look at it. And really, we're also pretty careful in this pre-Christmas period of modifying the loads for some of the guys who've got, I suppose, greater than 5 years, but we're tending to look at more 8 and 9 years NRL experience, because those guys just tend to be carrying some things, and we need to be really careful of that. And then also throwing into the mix, we've got international players who will return later, and the mixed bag of new recruits that you get. Obviously, you've got to be really careful when you're bringing new players in. It's something I spoke about at the NRL High Performance Conference, actually. I think we can, in the NRL here anyway, we could probably do it a little bit better with regards loading. And one of those things is over here, I'm pretty sure the UK Super League, when I was there anyway, did this probably a bit better than we do over here in the NRL at the moment. In that players come to you and you get absolutely no data on them whatsoever, or data. Is my Australian phrase.
Oh, wow. It's soccer, terrible. Football, data.
I get hammered for it by my UK. And so you get this new player turn up, for instance. We had a player turn up this year who was our most important signing in a number of years, and you get no information on them from GPS. And that's because some of the clubs, I think 14 of the clubs are with GP Sports and 2 of them are still with Catapult. And clubs just don't share data at all. Whereas I proposed what I was calling a GPS passport. And by that, the game day files, the DB3 files, are of no real relevance to a club once a player leaves. There's no reason why you can't send them with a player to his new club. So I was trying to see if I could get the other clubs on board. I've left it with the NRL. I'm not sure where we're at, but I think even looking at it from a player welfare point of view,
absolutely,
that would allow you to immediately individualise and look at a percentage of his game day loads. Where can you start with a player and what can he handle? They give you a real good insight into them early, whereas really we're going in blind with those new guys in that pre-Christmas period. And what we found at Parramatta, and certainly they found at Melbourne Storm as well, is that when those new players come in, because it's all about adaptations, they adapt to what they know, and then inevitably every club does things a little bit differently. There's more than one road to Rome, and what tends to happen is those players break down. It tends to be almost always, unless they're incredibly good athletes, you're new guys to the club who just struggle. And it's because you're having to guess in that first 6 week period or really steadily grade them in. I don't see why we can't just go to a GPS passport, because we all have to sign players and we all have to send players to other clubs. So that's just something, it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. I think we could probably do that a little bit better, but it's going to be reliant on all the clubs doing it. I think in the English Super League now, all the teams are with Stat Sports, which is fantastic, because they can immediately do that when they're transferring players, and it really gives all the heads of performance, heads of strength and conditioning at each club a little leg up. But you're all helping each other. You know, no one's getting a competitive advantage out of it, because everybody has to sign players. And mate, really, in that, just to summarise, in that 6 weeks pre-Christmas, we're really splitting the group into 3. We're looking at guys who need to put on size, and really for this game, that's almost everyone, apart from some of our big Pacific Island fellas.
That's almost everyone in our group. In that 6-week period, we want to build some rock solid size and strength. We want to increase their max aerobic speed. We want to decrease fat in almost all of them. We're trying to take down body composition a little bit and make them a little bit leaner. And we want to make sure, really importantly, that we're building strong habits and increasing the resilience from an injury prevention point of view. And we put a heap of work into that based on our screening, based on our profiles, and for the players who've been with us for a while, based on a couple of years worth of information and when they operate best. So that's really our pre-Christmas period summed up.
Mm-hmm. So go on, mate.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, I interrupted you then. Go on.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say about, you mentioned about working around kind of the 5-8 year NRL players, NRL experienced players. How are you kind of manipulating your sessions to be able to deal with not just the kind of the battered and bruised kind of going on to veteran type players, but those that pick up acute injuries? How are you working around them injuries to kind of keep them hopefully as much in line with those that aren't injured as possible?
Yeah, so we're pretty big on that. I spent some time with Bill Knowles a number of years ago, and he was just first class on this. And our focus is we want to know immediately what can they do. Because I think I'm married to a physio, so I can say this. But physios inevitably start off with, he can't do this, he can't do this, he can't do this. I think that's one thing I've really learned from being married to a physio in elite sport is we want, you got to learn how we talk to them as performance and strength and conditioning staff. It's important we know the physio perspective, the same as it's important we know the doctor's perspective, the same as important we know that where the coaches are coming from. But one thing we look at straight away is what can they do? We've got a skills coach here who does a fantastic job of it. He's really opened my eyes to it this year, a fellow by the name of Joe Grimer. And straight away, no matter what injury the player's got, he's got a skill drill that is safe, firstly, because that's important, and is relevant to that player's position, no matter what the injury. Almost every injury so far, he's come up with something. And fellas like that are priceless, who've just got fantastic creative imaginations. And that's one thing I took from Bill Knowles. He kind of used to summarise what he does, and I was one of the coaches kind of watching on his videos of his gymnastic play rehab with his staff, with his players, and I'm thinking, what a genius! How does he think of that? And me and my wife were lucky to spend a couple of days with him, and I posed the question to him, how do you think of that sort of stuff? It just looks so unbelievable. And he said, I'll make it up. I said, what? And he said, I'll make it up as I'm going along. I just have fun and play and make it up. And I thought, wow, you know you're a true genius when you can admit to making things up on the job. But he's right in that with that injury stuff, and that I suppose he's looking at late stage injury rehab. He was just making things up that he knew was safe with his coaching knowledge and his expertise. But he was just keeping them interested, like you say. It's the hardest group with rehab. So we make sure that we look at straight away what can they do. We're also pretty big on them training pitch side at the same time as the NRL team are training on field. And that's for two reasons. That's because sometimes I think in all elite sport, you can get players who might have a little niggle that they could possibly train with, or maybe they couldn't. So we like to let those players know that if you're not training, you're going to be working really, really hard at the side of the field. So we make sure that both for the players on field who are fully fit, they realise that team rehab, as we call it, works really, really hard. So, they're always within eyeshot of them. But also, it's to keep the players who are injured, they can see that goal right in front of them constantly during rehab or during, I call it rehab. It's not when they technically do their rehab. They'll do that at a separate time of day. But when they're doing what we call alternate conditioning sessions, and really that could be a mixture of watt bike sessions, boxing, grinder. It can be battling ropes. It could be any of those different alternate type things. And also, we'll try and integrate those players, let's say, who's got an ankle injury, but he's back to light running. We'll try and include him in any of the handling drills that are static. So we'll pull him out of that alternate group and throw him in, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes, as long as it's not disturbing the session. It's really important that they see that. And also for players who may be out for 1 or 2 weeks, it's important, especially in ball playing positions, that they can see new plays. Obviously, the game is built on set plays in rugby league. So we need to make sure, and the coach will sometimes call them out of a block of alternate conditioning, and they'll go and stand with the coach and observe and watch live the new players that we're running, or a specific play we might be playing planning for 2-3 weeks into the future. And so we try and keep them integrated with the group as much as we possibly can. And also, with that rehab group, we always make it goal-based. So it's criteria-based. So they can progress. You can progress when you can do this, rather than you're going to be out for 6 weeks. We'll look at you again each week. We don't try not to do that. So we have a really good framework for how we manage those injuries. And really, it's ankle, knee, hip, all that, rather than lower limb, upper limb. But yeah, we brainstorm it all the time as a staff. How can we get these players back quicker, safely? And so we'll give the players goals constantly. For instance, we had a player last year did his ACL in the Auckland Nine. So for anyone who doesn't know Australian Rugby League, that's the pre-season tournament just before the season kicks off. And he did his ACL, which meant he'd miss the whole season. That was a disaster for him. Trying to keep a player motivated like that, who's pretty much just finished his pre-season, he's going to have to go the whole season, and then he's going to be into a pre-season again. That's really, really hard for him. He's 24, 25 years of age, so it wasn't like he was a novice. But luckily, in my career, I'd done 2 ACLs myself, and I did one in the last game of pre-season. So I knew exactly how he felt. And one of the things Suki Hobson talks about this, she says every long-term rehab should be a journey. So they need to get something out of the journey, and they need to finish with lots of memories, not just about doing mini squats off a box or lots of glute band work, but like they need to learn something, come out of it. So we had a brainstorm about it as a staff, and one of the weaknesses of this particular player was his aerobic fitness had just been poor all his career. He was the type of player who just could not complete repeat efforts. And they said, look, he's tried, but probably never made enough sacrifice or never put enough effort into his aerobic conditioning. So we said, well, we've got a long time. Like we've got 9 months. Let's just do something completely away from rugby league. So we set him challenges, and he had a goal for each 3-week, 4-week period, and then he had a 6-month goal, and he ended up running a marathon in the end, which may sound absolutely crazy in a sport like rugby league, but we'd set him off, and he loved it. He absolutely loved it, and we'd report it back to the team. Then he'd say, hey, Kenny's got the 10K, did the Sydney Harbour 10K, and we got pictures of him on the 10K, and we sneakily got some photos of him running it when he didn't see us, and we made a little collage for him and presented it to him then, and we put pictures up of his times. He ran it with his wife. Just little things like that kept him interested, and he came back. He's playing now, and he was interviewed last week, and he mentioned in the interview, I'd completely forgotten we'd done it really, because he's back playing now. He's fully fit, and they said to him, how come you're playing so well this year? And he said, well, actually last year I went through a journey in my rehab, and I just found that I got better physically during that journey with something that was completely different to rugby league, and it made me think, God, we forget how important that is, to make sure that they're focused when they're injured, that they've got something to focus their mind on, because they're competitive animals, and if you give them enough things to compete for and strive for, they'll give you all their energy. But I suppose the key is just getting them to buy into it, and he was fantastic for it.
That's cool. So you mentioned Suki there, and also gymnastics, which kind of come together. Have you experimented with some of the gymnastic stuff that Suki's kind of been a massive proponent of?
Yeah, again, like my wife being a physio, she's probably a bit better equipped than me on that sort of stuff. So I've kind of tended to plagiarise her work in that regard. But again, yeah, a lot of it came for me really early. Before I met Suki, it was from Bill and Bill Knowles, and I think it's fantastic. It's first class. I know Suki's got a running lane trumpet, if that's the right phrase. I'm not so sure, but she's got one of them in her facility at Milwaukee Bucks, and I just think it's first class. And again, it's another stimulus for them. It gives them all sorts of different movement challenges, and when you're in that late stage rehab, even for prevention and preparation, it's just something a little bit different. And they're like big kids as well. Elite athletes, we sometimes forget that they're grown up children. So they love that sort of stuff as well. I've experimented with it in the time I did rehab back in the day, but certainly I'm a big admirer of it. I probably haven't got as much knowledge and expertise in that area as I should have, to be quite frank.
Mm-hmm. So just to kind of change tact a little bit, I just want to discuss nutrition, because nutrition isn't really a thing that's come up a lot in the podcast, obviously because of S&C coaches, sports scientists, but from my experience, being like a one-man band as an S&C coach, you kind of immediately, because you're an S&C coach, you know anything about nutrition. So do you just want to give us a little bit of an insight into kind of your role when it comes to nutrition and maybe some of the things that you're doing with your guys or have your nutritionists do with your guys?
Yeah, so anyone who knows me will tell you I'm a bit passionate about this. I'm a bit obsessed with it. And really, I think for me, apart from the training stimulus, sleep and nutrition are the two most important things. And we're both, the players are in control of both of those. I think certainly with sleep as well, we probably underestimated the amount of education they need. But certainly with nutrition, I just cannot believe how much education athletes need these days. And I think it's because of some of the ridiculous media things that get put out there these days that young athletes coming through just believe anything. Certainly when I started out, my first ever job was, again, a bit of a sad story. I did my ACL a week before preseason, and before preseason started, and I thought at one point I was going to lose my job, but they made me into rehab and nutrition coach. I'd been learning, doing an awful lot away from the club, and they put me in as a nutrition coach. And the first thing I did was, because I'm a bit of a control freak, Rob, I tried to take control of what they ate. So we just cooked breakfast for them, and it'd be funny if anyone's listening to this who was part of that squad. But they got 3 boiled eggs, a piece of wholemeal toast, and some baked beans. That was their breakfast. And believe me, that was a step up in the world for the majority of these boys. So they just began to learn to fuel properly. And then every day at breakfast, I'd give a little A4 piece of paper would be on there. And when they were sat bored, eating their breakfast, not talking to each other, it was before the days of mobile phones being constantly barraging us, they'd just read a little bit of information. And it might be something about how important omega-3 fatty acids are, for instance, or it might be about probiotics for gut health, or it'd be put into simple language for the boys. And I just got real good results from that. They started asking lots of questions, and I suppose that started me off on the. I'd always been obsessed with nutrition as a player, but it started me off on the obsession of how important it is for athletes and for elite performance. So from there, moving into, I went up to Doncaster Knights. I worked at Doncaster Knights for a few years, and we were lucky there that we had the club on site. So the kitchen there cooked lunch for us every day. So I did it there, and then went on to Hull FC, and again we were lucky at Hull FC because of the facilities we had. We had a full-time chef. I say full-time, he was in every time the players were in. So the players were getting breakfast, which had stepped up, and they got a choice of different eggs then, and we were able to combine it with our supplement sponsor to make sure that we were getting the micronutrients and individualizing supplementation a little bit. And we had lunch cooked for them every day. And again, I just think when you can do that, it's really important that you can drive it for the players and they understand it. It's easy at the elite level where I'm at now because it's almost expected, although there's still lots of teams out there not doing it at the absolute elite end. But certainly at Para, we place a huge emphasis on nutrition. And from a philosophy point of view, I'm just a really big believer in whole foods and eating real food. And people think it's maybe oversimplified sometimes when I'll present this or when I'll go into some of our corporate sponsors and talk to them about nutrition, and they can't believe how simple it is. Essentially, what I'm telling them is what they already know, that Coca-Cola isn't a good drink for you, and if you're drinking a lot of it, it's going to have some negative effects on your body. And that Powerade really and Gatorade and these sports drinks, they're just loaded with sugar. Originally, Gatorade was an electrolyte drink that tasted terrible. It tasted awful, and Coca-Cola bought out Gatorade and lumped in 35 grams of sugar, 40 grams of sugar, and then it tastes great, and then kids are drinking it. And so we our philosophy at Parramatta, and I suppose it's my philosophy, well, it completely is, really, is that we eat really low sugar. We try to be carb sensible, and that doesn't mean that we're huge carb haters, because we're not. But certainly, if you're fat, you're eating too much carbohydrate almost always, in our experience. So we educate the players. I've got a full-time nutritionist now who's first class, and I've also got we've got another nutritionist who works with the players' partners. And again, that's because it's a whole wide approach, and it took the players by surprise a little bit when we started talking about it initially. But we were basically saying there is no, in our opinion, in our sport, an elite rugby league player diet. The way you eat is the same as the way your children should eat, is the same as the way your wife should eat, in our opinion, for good health, because it's health first. That's our focus, is to make you healthy young men, and everything else will come from that. So our focus is on making sure we've got good gut health. So we have a real big emphasis on our pre and probiotics for our gut health, because there's a lot of research out there now that disease comes from the gut. I think you've got more nerve endings in your gut than you have in your brain. So that's why it's where it came from. That it's think with your gut, go with your gut instinct. So we've got a real big emphasis on gut health and quality of food. So we put a real emphasis on making sure that we find the best suppliers. So we have a grass-fed organic meat supplier. We have a really good dairy supplier. And we have a really good fruit supplier at Sydney Markets. And whatever the players eat when they're with us is an example of what they should eat at home. So we try to lead by example there. And like I say, we've got a full-time nutritionist who is a little bit different again. So he's actually a dietitian rather than a nutritionist. So give him his official title. But what he does is he'll go out to the players' houses and spend time with them, with their families. He'll show them how to cook. He'll look at what sort of environment they're cooking in, rather than saying, here's a diet plan, go away and follow that, which may or may not work. In my experience, it only works with the most disciplined of athletes, the ultra-disciplined guys. And I've had some of those in the past and it's worked great. But I think being a bit more open-minded on the nutrition side, and going out and educating the partners and educating the players on, here's how you can cook in your kitchen with what you've got in your cupboards. Here's something you could make. And with some of our younger guys who live together, we're lucky with some of the facilities we've got. Quite a few of our young players live in the same block of apartments that are owned by the club. So they'll have nights where one family will cook and they'll come down and eat together. And he might take that family shopping and say, look, here's where you can get, because they're all looking for quality, but as well as at the right budget. Everybody's budget restricted, apart from maybe some of the top players. But generally, most players, and we're looking at the younger lads a lot of the time here with education. We can take them shopping and show them how they can eat on a budget, but eat really, really good food that's going to help them be healthier and perform better. So we try to be really wide-ranging, but certainly when we travel, we make sure that the food is the very, very best quality. And the players have found, especially in my first year at Parramatta, and they couldn't believe that it was a very big change. So we pushed away things like a lot of processed foods. They were eating a hell of a lot of bread, and we're not bread haters, but we tried to really limit that. It didn't work really well for a lot of them. And they found that they couldn't believe that when we ate, it was a little bit higher in really good fats. It was a bit lower in, or fairly large amount lower in processed sugars and carbohydrate. And we obviously upped the protein, but up the quality of the protein most importantly. And the players really couldn't believe how tasty it was. That was the first thing that struck them. They said, can't believe how good it tastes to eat well. Because I think generally they'd been pushed down the track, just in this experience, they've been pushed down the track of sucking out all the fat of food and eating really low fat, and it probably didn't taste that good. So they've been really easily bought. They've bought into it really easily because they found that it tastes really good. So that's been a big buy for us. But they've been great. They've bought into it. It's certainly nothing revolutionary. Like I say, it's pretty simple. And we say to the players quite often, especially to our juniors, I think if you put your hand on your heart, unless you're really dumb, most athletes know whether a food is healthy or not. I know there's a lot of tricks. There's a lot of tricks out there with marketing, and certainly we try to highlight those to the players. But hand on heart, I think most people and most players, they know if it's a healthy option or not. And then I suppose on the other side of the scale, we tell them there's an 80-20 rule. If you're really good 80% of the time, 20% of the time, let go. Eat. If you really need something, our nutritionist said to them in the first presentation, and I thought, God, that's gold. She said to them, if you're looking at a chocolate bar and you've got to eat it, and you've absolutely got to eat it, and you feel like, God, I really want it, I really, really need it, go and eat it. Eat it, but make sure you enjoyed it. And then, you know what? Move on. Because the world won't end if you eat a chocolate bar. Just eat it, move on. But it's important you know how to move on. So I think making sure that, we try to keep, I suppose, a holistic approach to it, Rob, but make sure that they know that it's not the end of the world if you have a bad meal, or if you have a bad day where you don't eat well due to circumstance or whatever it is. But through education and through discipline, let's get back on the horse and eat right at the next available opportunity and kick on from there. So yeah, we're pretty passionate. I could talk all day about nutrition, but I won't bore you.
Well, I'm just conscious of time, mate, and I'm guessing that your wife and your kids are probably looking out the front window thinking, "What's Dad still doing in the car?"
So don't worry. If I wait long enough, they'll be in bed.
But I mean, there's so many things that I kind of want to touch on with you. But there's we could potentially do a part 2 here. There's so much to talk about. But where can people keep in touch with what you've got going on? Are you pretty active on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram?
Oh yeah, I'm more than happy for anyone to email me.
Yeah.
Email's paul.devlin@parraeels.com.au, or I'm fairly active on Twitter. I'm not all that opinionated, I must admit.
Okay.
But
yeah.
I try not to be, but I follow a whole heap of people who are a hell of a lot smarter than me, and I get loads out of it. My Twitter's Paul Devs, I'm pretty sure. So I think Twitter's fantastic, and like I say, I listen to your podcast all the time. I think I told you that before, mate. I think it's first class, and there's been some really, really smart people who I've had the benefit to listen to on my car drive to work each day, and I really appreciate all your work.
No, thanks, mate. I'll drop you the $5 when you're back in the UK. So who are the kind of people that you follow on Twitter and follow on blogs and websites and things like that?
Well, obviously, I think Kelvin Giles is an absolute staple for me. And then Ian McKeown, I'm a massive fan of Ian McKeown. I think he's brilliant, and Suki Hobson as well. Having met Suki in Melbourne when I was down there and spent a good bit of time with her and got to know her as a friend. She's an incredibly smart young lady as well. But then there's quite a few guys in America. Like I was following an awful lot of Eric Cressy's work, and then there's some good guys in Australia here. I forget the names of them now. I'm put on the spot. I always find Darren Burgess's presentations to just be so sensible. I just think he's just so sensible and smart when he presents. But then one of the guys, he's head of strength at Melbourne Storm, Dan DePasqua. I get an absolute mountain of information and knowledge from that guy, mate. He is just absolutely first class. But he hides under a stone somewhere. He's not a big social media guy, but he's one of the smartest guys I've ever worked with. And he's great. I think for me, I really like to call people up and brainstorm about stuff. I'm a bit of a performance nerd, so I have all these different people who I speak to. I spoke to John Noonan a couple of weeks ago. He's got some great experiences as well, and it's just different. We're all nerds, really, I think, aren't we? Chasing the dream of perfect athletic development. Yeah. So I bounce ideas off everybody. That's why I find your podcast so good, because I can listen to people just talking about their ideas. I think it's fantastic.
No, that's cool, mate. Well, like I say, I don't want to take too much of your time, but we'll keep in touch, and we'll nail a part 2 when we can when I can get you pinned down.
Yeah, no problem, mate. It's good to speak to an English voice.
Likewise, mate. Likewise, and right, we'll keep in touch. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Rob. See you, mate.
See you, pal. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to episode 80 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the chat with Paul. So like I said at the start, if any of you do have any feedback or ideas for up-and-coming guests, please fire them my way. Direct message on Twitter, email, whatever it may be, just fire them over. Just before I let you go, I just want to say a massive thanks to the sponsors today, to Train with Push and Val Performance, makers of the Nordboard. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and I will speak to you soon.